in a stakeholders engagement. SEATINI, in partnership with the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, organized a national stakeholders dialogue on the European Union's directives and their implications on Uganda's coffee sector. This effort is aimed at promoting inclusive and sustainable trade in Africa, enhancing stakeholders engagement and awareness around the European Union directives, including the Corporate Sustainable Due Diligence Directive and the European Union Deforestation Directive. But what exactly does this directive mean?
If you have destroyed the forest and planted coffee from December 2020, your coffee cannot access the European market. And going forward, you will not be able to access the European Union market if you have planted coffee on deforested land.
Herbert Kafeero, the Programs and Communications Manager at SEATINI, highlighted that 60% of the coffee in Uganda is exported to the European Union, and Uganda cannot afford to miss out on the EU market as there is a deadline for the 31st of December this year to comply with the traceability requirements. Coffee is a principal cash crop, an export commodity. However, challenges like climate change has affected the coffee production.
Coffee exports have been increasing over the years. And Uganda is one of the largest coffee exporters in Africa and in the world. And coffee is a principal cash crop for the economy. We look at that nearly 1.8 million households are engaged in coffee farming in Uganda. And coffee contributes nearly a third to Uganda's export earnings. So in simple terms, coffee is a very important cash crop and export commodity. But the coffee sector has been facing a number of challenges even before these European Union directives were introduced. These challenges that the coffee sector has been facing include climate change, the low prices, among others. Most African countries, including Uganda, mainly export raw coffee beans, green coffee, to the European Union. And we are missing out on greater returns because value is captured at the downstream segments of the value chain. But Uganda and other African countries exporting green coffee beans, all raw coffee, without adding value on it. It means we are facing challenges in terms of the volatile prices because prices are determined at a global level, but also there's the other issue, the challenge, that if we don't comply now with these directives, we will lose out on that lucrative market. Because as a country, Uganda, we need every market available for our agricultural products, all exports that we have to sell outside. We need all those markets.
He further elaborated that Uganda Coffee Development Authority placed a budget of $35.6 billion in order to undertake mapping and traceability requirements. However, the government has provided $13.9 billion. The funding is not enough to undertake the traceability and mapping to show that Uganda's coffee is deforestation-free.
That funding to UCDA is not enough to enable UCDA to undertake traceability and the mapping, because the mapping that is needed to eventually culminate into a report that will be submitted to EU, to European Union by 31st December 2024, is actually supposed to be guided by satellite technology, GPS, that has to actually track all the coffee farms in the country, and all that documentation feeds into a report that will be submitted to the EU to show that our coffee is deforestation-free. Because EU deforestation regulation requires us to confirm and comply that all our coffee is deforestation-free, because coffee, among other agricultural products, are looked at as drivers of deforestation.
Dr. Gerard Chalo, the Director of the Development Services at the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, explained the mandatory requirements to access the EU market and cautioned farmers to comply with these requirements in order to export their coffee.
For us as a nation, the regulation requires that we trace our coffee from the garden to the market, which means we must know who is producing the coffee, where are they located, which coffee are they growing. And this requires us to file a due diligence certificate. So for the exporters who are exporting coffee, they must file a due diligence certificate, which shows the location in terms of GPS coordinates. If you have more than 10 acres of land, we shall require a polygon. A polygon is kind of the entire drawing of your garden. And if you have less than 10 acres, we require 1 GPS point. These are mandatory.
The government aims to achieve compliance by mapping all farmers and establishing a comprehensive database.
We need a traceability system. We need a national database where we have all our coffee farmers and their locations, and whether they have 10 acres or more, we must have that, such that our exporters are able to access the system, download the due diligence certificate that shows that the coffee we are exporting is actually not related to or is not resulting from deforestation. For us to achieve that, we need to register and map all our farmers.
Nabukwasi Jane Josephine, a farmer and community monitor, emphasized that most farmers need a lot of sensitization on the law and the EU directives to avoid misconceptions.
I think the challenge as farmers which we are going to get is that when you look at the period from now up to 31st December, registering all those farmers and then informing them about the EU directives. Because when you look at most of the farmers, even the National Coffee Act, some they don't know the contents which are in the Coffee Act. Now, the UCDA has to ensure that the farmers are being sensitized on the National Coffee Act and then on the EU directives. I think within this short period, it is going to be a problem to farmers. And you know, our farmers, when a new thing is being established, for example, like the EU directive, the farmers may think that, are they introducing a tax for members to be registered so that they know that for me, I have so much amount of coffee so that they can tax me. So there is going to be that mix-up.
The Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive by the EU aims to foster sustainable and responsible corporate behavior throughout the global value chains. The directive focuses on ensuring that companies identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for actual and environmental impacts in their operation, subsidies, and value chains. Nora Osende for UCTV News.